Hello everyone, welcome to the Analytics Bot YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about Sqoop. So what is Sqoop? Oftentimes what we have, the data is in an RDB MES or the relation database such as MySQL, and we want to transfer that to a HDFS or Hadoop based system, for example Hive. So in that case, one way is to import a table and write some code to do that. What the Apache people did is they came up with Sqoop, which does exactly that. It is a simple yet powerful tool that helps in transferring bulk data between Hadoop based databases and traditional databases. So it can transfer the data both ways. In this post, we'll be mostly focusing on transferring data from a RDBMS to a Hadoop based database. This will also be a hands-on exercise, so I will suggest that you either download a Cloudera or Hortonworks based system on your desktop. If you have less than 8 GB of RAM, I will suggest going for a Cloudera rather than Hortonworks system. If you have around 16 GB of RAM, then you can go with either of them, because Hortonworks requires too much of RAM. If you have less than 8, then I will suggest that you go for a Hortonworks HDP trial. This is a free trial on Azure's based system. You get around $200 credit, so if you can watch my tutorial here to get started on that. So Hadoop Sqoop is not difficult. There are only certain commands that you have to familiarize oneself. So in this tutorial we'll be covering the following: basic syntaxes, show tables and show databases, importing databases and table from MySQL to a Hadoop based system, importing tables as text file, sequence file and avro file formats. There are different file formats, and this basically has some trade-off between the speed and the size of the file on the HDFS. Then we can also import tables using a where clause, and then we can we'll see one example of exporting data table from HDFS to MySQL. So let's get started. So the documentation is good. We can see the documentation here. You can, if you use a link, you can browse through the documentation, and it's pretty much good. They have covered everything. They have given the parameters and the description and all those things. So it should be not so difficult. You might have to understand a little bit, but it's really good. The documentation is really good. So for this demonstration purpose, what I'm using is a Cloudera based virtual machine. So this I downloaded is one of the exercises when I was doing a course on Udacity. So let's get started. So the first thing is basically connecting to the MySQL database. So for connecting to the MySQL database, the training and the username is training and the password is training too. So this will connect us to a MySQL database. So I'll open that. So I'm already connected. So I'll just connect to myself. So if I do MySQL -u, that's a user training, and it will prompt for a password. Password is training too. So now this will basically give me a terminal window. We can basically connect to a specific database, and then we can see the tables in that particular database. So I will not go into that. We can also check the host name. So this will basically give the host name of the particular machine, and you can use localhost, but I will suggest to use the host name of the particular machine, because when you're going to work on a cluster, then this will actually help. Then and that point of time, this might help to troubleshoot some issues. Let's start with some basic exercises to get the directories in a Hadoop root folder. We use Hadoop fs -ls. And this will give the directory in the root folder, and one way to see whether it's a directory or file is to see that D. If we see that D, this means that this is a directory, and if we see a dash, this means that this is a file. So you can see this is actually a file which I transferred using HDFS minus put command. I'll cover that in some other tutorial. Right now I'm just covering Sqoop. To check the contents in a specific folder, we use HDFS minus ls slash user. So here this was the user directory, and within user directory we have hive, who, and training, and within training we have purchases.txt. To check the version of Sqoop, all we do is Sqoop version command, and this will basically give the version of that. So let's run that. So I'll go to my terminal and I'll say Sqoop version, and yeah, so now it gives me Sqoop 1.4.1. I think the current version is 1.4.6, so I think for the purposes of demonstration this should be fine enough. We can see all the commands that are possible using the Sqoop help command, and this gives us code gen, create high table, eval, export, help, import all tables, job, list databases, list tables, merge, metastore, version. So we just saw version. We'll also see import all tables, export, eval, list databases, list tables in this exercise, and this will be a hands-on exercise. So let's start with Sqoop list database command. So before proceeding, I'm assuming that you have a running Cloudera instance, and also that Cloudera instance has a MySQL database in that. So we saw that how we can get the machine name using the host name minus f command on the Linux based terminal, and MySQL mostly runs on the 3306 port, but please confirm before this running because this might cause an issue. Hopefully by default it's 006, and it should be the same on your machine as well. You should also know the username and password for the MySQL. This, I mean, for my case it's training for both password and the username. It might again change depending on the VM that you are using. So when we try to connect, so the first thing that we need to do is we had to connect to the MySQL database. So this is done using a connection string, and a connection string is it basically Sqoop opens up a JDBC connection to the MySQL, and the connection string is JDBC colon MySQL colon / localhost dot local domain dot colon 3306. So just to dissect that, we are opening a JDBC connection to MySQL on this host machine. So the MySQL database is on this machine and the port number is this. That's why I said that these two things are important. By default this should be 306, and whatever this is on your machine, we can find that by hostname minus f command. We also use the username training and hyphen password training. So all those things can be found when we look at the documentation. So the documentation is quite comprehensive. You might have to just go through it before we do that. So we can see that this is a connect parameter that we need to pass. So once this command runs, what we need to do is basically it will give us the databases in that machine. So let's run that command. So we'll say Sqoop connect. So these are the parameters that we need to pass. I will say JDBC colon / MySQL / localhost dot local domain colon 3306, and this, and on a Linux based terminal we can do a backslash, and it will take to us a new line. So this is just a continuation. Then we pass on the username, that's training. Then we pass password, that's again training. And then we'll say list databases, press enter. So actually what I forgot to do is basically I had to pass that list databases at the start, because it's now looking okay what I should do, and it can't find. So Okay, now it's giving me an error. I'll just pause this video for a little bit time, and then once this error is resolved, I'll come back. So apparently I had misspelled this MySQL to just MySQL, and that's why the error was given to me. So as we can see that now it has listed all the databases to us. So it's Hue, Metastore, MySQL test and training. So this should be fine enough. Now the next step is basically listing all the tables for a particular database. So without going into MySQL, we can actually list all the tables. But before that, let's confirm whether this is true or not. The databases that it listed to us, whether that's actually correct or not. So I have another terminal open to me, and what I'll do is basically I'll ask MySQL to show all the databases to me using the show databases semicolon command. And as we can see, it's the same number of columns maybe in a better format than what we saw earlier. So information underscore schema, Hue, Metastore, MySQL test and training. The total 6, and here as well we have 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6, right? So let's check the tables. So the command will be the same. I'll just edit the command. So instead of list databases, we have list tables, and then which of these databases we want to see. So I'll just say training. So for training database, show me all the tables. Everything else remains the same. So let's run this, and we can see that we have movies, Bible underscore freck, city by country, countries, and shake underscore freck. Let's confirm if it's true. So I'll use the training database, and I'll say show tables, and we see the same movies, Bible nursery, city by country, countries, shake underscore freck. So we are good. So I mean, what we did here is we basically we saw the tables without actually logging into the MySQL database. So let's move to the next command. So next command will be eval command, and what eval does is it basically evaluates a SQL query for us without actually again going to the MySQL database. So here what we can see is basically I'm just getting out the top 10, like the first 10 rows from the countries table. So let's try to run that. I'll just copy paste the command from here, and I'll paste it here. So what we're doing is Sqoop eval will basically tell Sqoop to eval some query that's coming in. We have the connection string as the hyphen connect, then we have hyphen username training, hyphen password training, and then hyphen query is the query that should be executed and returned back to us. So I'm saying select star from countries limit 10, so just the first 10 rows. So once we run that, basically it fetches all that. So right now everything is done as a fetch. So it fetches all these things from, so we can see we have Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, and so on. Next is basically import all tables. So import all tables is used when we are trying to import all the tables from our database. So instead of we will see that we also have an option of importing one table at a time, but let's say there are hundreds of tables in a particular database. We're not going to run it 100 times. We are just going to use import all tables in that case. So the syntax is pretty much the same. We need the connection string, the username and password. Here we need additional parameter called target dir. So it will be hyphen hyphen target there, and this is the location to which the files should be imported on HDFS, and this location should not exist, otherwise the Sqoop job will fail. We also have number of mappers, so it's either hyphen hyphen num hyphen mappers or just hyphen n, and both these parameters are same. What this will do is basically, this will how Sqoop imports it splits the table into some parts, and then it starts threads for importing each of these parts, and the number of threads are being controlled by this hyphen hyphen num mappers parameter. By default, I think it's 4, but you can set this according to the size of data set. Let's say you have a big data set, then obviously you want to take this more, and it also depends on the machine capability that you have. You can't run a lot many threads on a simple machine. So let's try to run this. So I will basically delete this backslash because I don't need it here. Also, I think I already have the Sqoop underscore import table because I ran it once before to check all these queries. So now what we see is Sqoop import dash all tables, and this will import all tables. The connection string is this, and we have given the database here, training. So from training, import everything, username and password, and we have the targeted and the num mappers. So let's try to run this command, and this will take a lot of time, and there seems to be some error in this. Let's see what their error is. So whenever we are running a command, if there's an error, it will basically given us error. So basically it's saying error passing arguments for import all tables, unrecognized argument hyphen hyphen target underscore dir. Okay, so I'll basically pause this video for some time, and then once this issue is resolved, I'll come back. I think there's some other So I managed to solve this problem. I needed to use warehouse dir instead of the target dir, and I think this is because the first time that we are trying to import this table, we have to use warehouse dir, and the next time, we have to use something like a target dir. And now we can see that it started the map reduce job, which will basically import a table. And I also want, once this is done, I'll show you what it's running. There's something called a bounding vals query. So this is what we see. So I think one of the tables is imported, and right now it's importing the bible underscore frec table. What it's doing is it's selecting minimum word and the maximum word. So let's say there's a sample table called employee table, and the employee table has the employee ID, the employee name, and the employee ID basically runs from, let's say, 1 to 100. Now what this bounding val query will do is it will try to find the minimum employee ID and the maximum employee ID. In this case, the minimum employee ID will be 1 and the maximum employee ID will be 100. And now let's say the number of mappers that we have is 5. So what it will do is which will basically divide these 100 records into 5 parts, that's 20 each record. And then each of these threads that will be running, they'll be each importing 20 records. And this is why this this bounding val query is important. Sometimes what will happen is the primary key will be a character variable, and in that case I don't know how that functions. I tried to Google it. If somebody has an idea, please feel free to comment on the video. So again, it's basically right now it can't in that case this will run here, but there are some other clauses basically in cases where there is no primary key in the table. I think this will give an error here. The word is the primary key in this table. So what we can see is basically it retrieved 31,809 records, and all in all, and it took 28 seconds to run all this thing. Again, it's not necessary to import all the tables. We can import just a specific table, and everything remains the same, apart from the fact that we need to add another table parameter. So this table parameter will say, okay, which table we have to import here. So in this case, we have this table parameter that we need to add. So I'll just copy this here and then paste. Copy it here, and then let's go back here. So let's see the command. This is sqoop import. So import is basically when we say just import, it automatically means we are importing table. And then we have the connection string. Within the connection string we have the database name from which we are trying to import a table, and this is training. And make sure that the table exists with the same name in this database on MySQL. We have the username, password, the table, and the table that we are trying to import is shake underscore frec. So when we run that, it basically gives me an error, and it's saying that file already exists. So whenever we are running any sqoop command, we have to make sure that this file does not already exist. So if we see hadoop fs minus ls, so let's see user, this is actually already present, so that's why it's giving an error. So let me remove this. And let's run it again. Okay, now it's basically running fine. So as I said, basically whenever we are trying to run, we have to make sure that the path does not exist, and this will always create a folder inside user, and within that it will try to fetch all the records. So that was import a specific table. We can also check and then yeah, this is so once this is done, what we can do is basically we can see okay what was imported. So we'll see Hadoop fs minus ls user training. What was the table name? The table name was shake underscore rec. So let's see what was inside this. What is inside this? So here we have imported these parts, and since we have given the number of mappers, that's why we have these specific parts. And if you just give number of mappers as 1, this will just be part and 0. And this is how basically the data is stored on HDFS. It will store in parts, and this is just because we have used more than 1 mappers. And if we have to see the data in a particular file, this is how we see. We use the Hadoop fs minus cat command, and this will give us the data between. So this is how the data was imported, and this is all of the data. I should have used the head command, but this is how we can see. You can use this command to see a specific part. We can also import table as a text file, sequence file, and avrodata file. So this is sometimes important. Whatever I read on the internet, it's basically all these file formats have their own unique advantages and disadvantages, and it's basically on the speed on the size and the file size part. So some of these file formats take more size on disk, some take less, some have a higher transfer speed and some are lower. So when we are transferring data on a gigabyte or a petabyte scale, then these things matter. Right now for the small data set that we have, this won't matter too much. So the only argument that changes is basically we can import a table as a text file or a sequence file or a avrodata file. So this is the only addition that we have. So let's run a sequence file. So we have Sqoop import connection string, the user and password, the table movies as sequence file, this basically, and the target there is this. So let's run. I think this will give me an error because this location exists maybe. Let's see if it runs. Okay, it's running. So it's now running a MapReduce job to import as a sequence file. And sequence is a specific file format. So it retrieved around 1682 rows that were in the number of in that movies table. So let's see how many rows, and yeah, 1682. So we have imported all the rows. I mean, it's good to see the number of rows that are in the MySQL just to confirm that everything went fine. So now what we will do is basically we will see what was imported. So as before we saw everything. Now we'll try to see so this is what we imported, and let's see. parameters of this. So we can see that although we can read some of these things, but not everything, there are some weird characters, and this is the characteristic of sequence file. It stored data in some other format, so unlike the last time, we can't exactly read everything, and it's not line by line. So there are some again we can run the same thing with the avro file format, so I'm not going to in those details. We can also import a table using a where clause. So let's say we want to import from the countries table all those records where there is a within the country name. So what we do is basically we can run this query, and when we run this query, it will do exactly the same thing. So I'll clear my screen. Okay, it's because there was a backslash, so it was import expecting a new line. So I'll just run everything together. So now what we're doing is we are trying to import a table. Connection string is here, username and password. I think that at this point of time you are pretty much familiar. And now we have a where clause. This where clause will basically contain a specific clause that should be executed, and only those records which return a true for this will be imported. So what we have is basically name like percentage a. So anything that contains a shall be imported. And then the number of mappers. So I think sometime back I said the number of dash mappers is also -n. I think it's -m, so please correct that. So once we run that, it starts importing all the jobs. So for the time being, let's see how many records are there in the countries table. So there are 249 records in the countries table, and it retrieved 212 records. So that basically means around 37 records don't have any a in it. The last thing that we are going to talk about today is basically the export command. So Sqoop also gives the functionality to export the data from HDFS to a MySQL based system, so our RDBMS system. While doing this, make sure that the database exists on the MySQL database, and also the table is created within that database on MySQL. So this is the command, and basically what we're doing is here we are trying to export, and we have the connection string as before. We have created a new database here, training_new. Everything remains the same. You have the username, password, and which table we want to export, the export directory from where it should be exported, and it currently exists. Then the input fields delimiter. I'm going to cover in much more details in another Sqoop tutorial. So for today, this is all, and I hope that you really liked it. If there are any questions, please feel free to post those questions on my blog or on the this YouTube video. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you next time.